Skyward Sword, the game we all thought was going to be the last big game for the Wii, but then Nintendo of America just announced that Xenoblade was coming to the US, but that's a whole nother story. Skyward Sword starts out with none other than Link, who's training at an academy to become a knight. The game starts out with you needing to get ready for a ceremony, but your bird is missing, and you end up running around Skyloft looking for him. During this time, you get to know your environment and meet some of the side characters, but eventually you find your bird and compete in the ceremony, and the whole thing is basically a 2-hour tutorial, and it was well integrated into the plot. Skyloft is definitely a nice main area. Mostly everything you need for your adventures is Skyloft, and I like the supporting characters this time around. If you focus on your side quests, they'll really develop, and some of them end up being a part of the main quest. And I gotta say, my favorite character, and you're gonna look at me weird for saying this, but I'm gonna say Groose was my favorite character. Those just starting out with the game, you're gonna be like, Groose is a douchebag, but at the end of the game, you will love Groose. On the downside, I hated Pledge of the Passion. Like, I did a side quest, and I just hated him more. There are plenty of side quests to do around Skyloft, and some of them even take you to the ground below. But yeah, going back to the main plot. After all is said and done concerning your bird, you and Zelda are about to kind of have a moment, and Sword Blocker of the Year, wink wink, Ghirahim sweeps her up in a tornado and brings her down below the clouds, and then it's up to you to find her. What I like about this game is that Zelda isn't a damsel in distress. Like, she needs your help, but she's just not going to sit around and wait for you to save her. She's on her own mission this time around, and she definitely holds her own. Like, it was nice to see that this time around. And from there on, you're playing through a traditional Zelda game with some interesting twists. For example, getting to the dungeons takes a lot longer than completing the dungeon itself. The dungeons aren't exactly like the main event this time around. Like, I completed the first 2 dungeons thinking, wow, that was kind of short. But then I got the feeling that Nintendo wanted to spread out all of Skyward Sword's great moments throughout the areas, not just the dungeons themselves. Like, some of the bosses aren't even temples. Though, with that said, one of my favorite moments was still the boss fight at the end of Temple 5. Link kind of had himself a bit of an Uncharted moment in there. The boss fights are great this time around. I'm really looking forward to boss rush mode. I should probably touch upon the controls. Like, for the most part, they work like a dream. It was a good idea to use the motion plus gyroscope instead of the sensor bar for control recognition. The sword was definitely one-to-one. Like, one thing I loved was pointing the sword at my enemies before I killed them. It was like, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna get you, and then just in that order, you know, and I just killed them. Yeah, I didn't have enough for the gold remote, so I just stuck with this. But yeah, the items are pretty great this time around, but I'll admit the claw shots did disappoint me a bit. Like in Twilight Princess and some of the areas in the Sky Temple, all you had to do was Z-target, and then it would like instantly shoot, and then you were kind of just going like Spider-Man. But this time around, it's kind of just like point and shoots. So it worked well, but it wasn't as fun. On the opposite end, though, I really did enjoy the bow more because it wasn't Z-target and shoot. And here, you really got to pick your shots. Like, headshot, crotch shot, you can make a Bobgoblin, take an arrow to the knee. And I was a little iffy about the bow being first person when you shot it, but given how some of the puzzles played out, it made a lot of sense. And if your pointer ever gets out of whack, just press down on the D-pad and it'll censor it on the screen, and this takes less than a second. My one gripe was the nunchuck. Like, it worked too well. Like, sometimes I go to scratch my nose and it would shield, and Link would just shield block. Sometimes when I try to stab forward, like, I'd accidentally do a spin attack because I'd accidentally move the nunchuck while doing it, and to do a spin attack you do is this. So there was that occasional mix-up, but other than that, the controls worked fine. As for my thoughts on Fee, the sidekick that you have around this time, she talked way too much, and her lack of personality didn't exactly help, but there were a few times I didn't really know what to do, and Fee really came through, and there were a few moments where she actually did show emotion in the story, and it did get to me. As for the villain, Ghirahim, he's a special one. Really, really special, and that's all I'm going to go say concerning that, but he did give us some pretty good boss fights. Nintendo kind of pulled a Bowser with him and having us fight him throughout the game. As for the art style and graphics, for the most part, they're great. Like, I feel bad for those teenagers that were all like, I'm an adult, I don't need cartoony graphics. Like, they're missing out on a great game. It's like people need to realize Nintendo's a Japanese company and they're not about that whole super brown realism that Western developers love. With that said, after Nintendo showed off that Wii U Zelda tech demo last year, they should really go in that direction for their next game. You can't show off something that good looking and not follow through with it. Getting back to Skyward Sword though, there are a few structures in the game that when you go up to them and like get a closer look, they do look kind of shoddy, but none of them are super obvious. I thought it was kind of cool how some of the backgrounds look like paintings, but then when you're able to go to that area, it'd just be like back to normal. But overall, they're great. The final boss battle, like visually alone, fantastic. From a gameplay standpoint, Nintendo wanted to vary things out, so they threw in a bunch of new things at you. Like there's a minecart section, a la Donkey Kong Country. The Silent Realms are there, and you're collecting the tears while dodging the Guardians. Those portions of the game weren't fun for me, but for what they were, like to make me feel uneasy and be careful and like have Link be really stealthy, it did its job. There's another area where you have like no items and you have to make your way up an entire section, getting them back one by one, and that section I like a lot. Let's just say it's a long stretch between Temples 6 and 7, and Nintendo throws a lot of different ideas at you. Overall, you have your traditional Zelda game with several new gameplay aspects, a great story with a few twists, and some great emotional moments. Nintendo truly gave us something special with this one. So what did you think of the game? What were your thoughts? Are you an adult that doesn't need cartoony graphics that wrote off this game entirely? Let me know in the comment section and maybe we can get a little discussion going.